all look at the world through different eyes, but many of us are united by a love of and appreciation for nature. Most of the footage in this story was taped as the events unfolded on November 1st, 1993 in Santa Barbara, California. That day, Mike Lunsford was one of the rangers patrolling El Capitan State Beach.
South Coast 585.
I received a call that there was a whale stranded. I looked over the sea cliff and in fact saw a humpback whale partially submerged right on the beach.
Peter Howarth, director of the Santa Barbara Marine Mammal Center, was notified of the problem.
You can measure perhaps the richness of our lives by the company we keep in the forms of the wildlife around us. I think it gets back to our dignity as human beings. Here's an endangered species that's in trouble. Do you just let it die? I've never seen a humpback whale of this size out of the water before.
What went through my mind is, how on earth are we going to do this?
This was the first whale rescue for volunteer Mary Stack.
It was 45 feet long, weighed probably 40 tons, and there's no way that our boats were going to be able to pull this whale off.
The weight of the animal coupled with suction of the sand, you might be dragging something like 100 or 150 tons. I felt like Roy Scheider in Jaws when he said, "We need a bigger boat."
Peter called Exxon's California production manager, Robbie Shilhad.
Obviously, there was an emergency that needed our assistance. We have very powerful, high horsepower workboats. We were able to release them from the service they were doing and started heading them towards the beach.
Humpback whales, their mass is so great that just the weight will cause them to suffocate. They can't lift their chest to breathe. Only the sea can support such large animals.
We were keeping water all over the whale because they're very prone to sunburn.
Rescue diver Glenn Allen also volunteered to assist in the effort.
We definitely had a time constraint. The quicker that we could move and act on the whale and getting him back in the water, the better. But with the tide moving out, the task became increasingly difficult.
Another volunteer who responded was physician Mark Hansen.
I've been studying humpbacks as a passion for 20 years. I saw no apparent injuries, no scars indicating recent net entanglements. I was trying to hear heart sounds and listened with the stethoscope, but what was much more startling to me, and one of the great moments of my life, was I could hear this animal vocalizing very audibly. I won't say singing, but it was the same kind of sounds, the very high and low sounds. I thought this was a very good sign. A moribund whale, a whale that was exhausted and losing consciousness, would not be vocalizing in that manner.
When the two Exxon boats arrived, the whale had been beached for more than 3 hours.
I've had as much experience as perhaps anyone in rescuing these animals, and yet there's no handy guidebook. There isn't somebody to call to say, "How do you do this?" This hadn't been done before. Our plan was to get a line around the flukes for the tail.
Okay, it's coming underneath.
I knew that the tail stalk is tremendously strong, and you've got a great handle, a great place to tow from. But the flukes are potentially lethal.
Everybody has to move that way.
I had to move the crowd back out of the way so in the event that the rope broke, it wouldn't injure some of the bystanders.
The more we pulled, no matter which way we positioned the boats, nothing was moving. It was stuck there.
This isn't big enough. We have more line.
The smaller boat was just not enough to pull this animal off the beach. We got in this enormous tow line that was attached to the Absher tide, the larger of the vessels. It's a Kevlar synthetic line that's called blue steel.
Pull now, pull now, pull now.
having people handling the area around its tail flukes. And considering that the whale couldn't see what we were doing, it still stayed calm.
We're having people dig trenches. We wanted a flow of water around the animal to break the suction. His pectoral fins and his flukes are both above the sand, and as the waves come in, if you have a very gentle strain, it might just be enough to start coaxing him out. We had high expectations that after we attached the line to the whale, that the whale would just move right off the beach. That didn't happen.
I felt sad for the whale because I could see the body being distorted by the weight of it being on the sand.
Most of us were surprised that the whale was still alive. I mean, it was watching us. It had its big eye and it was following us around. But time was definitely a factor. The surf was so small that there wasn't much circulation of water around the animal.
He's going to try to generate some waves with the boat. George Nash from Exxon had the great idea of having the smaller crew boat cruise back and forth offshore, literally making waves, helping to break that suction.
This pectoral flip just starts raising up out of the sand, and we knew that this was definitely a viable whale.
We started taking progressively heavier strain on the animal, really pulling hard, full power, having the other boat race back and forth. People splashing water, like Gulliver and the Lilliputians, all of this going on at once, and still nothing happened.
The sun is starting to set, and we're getting very concerned. You could see the life just almost going out of the whale as it gasped for breath.
I felt that it was really a drastic situation, called for drastic means to try to save this animal. We had the larger vessel run in towards shore to allow some slack to fall on the tow line, and then firewall the throttles so that we had the full inertia of the big ship pulling against the whale.
It was an amazing feeling. Everybody just started yelling and screaming.
You just got really excited that this is going to work. This really can work.
When we tow him out, I can jump over the side with a wetsuit and cut him loose. Okay.
Peter and some of the other volunteers went out preparing to cut the rope from the tail once they got it in deep enough water.
There we go.
The whale's fighting it now.
This whale's gonna beat us. And the animal was starting to get excited, and you could see the animal moving its pectoral fins, and its blows were stronger.
But we were losing an opportunity to maintain a certain safety margin because it was getting dark.
Glenn, why don't you swim over and get the hook?
We need the big
It was a real eerie experience.
One of our volunteers dove down and on a single breath cut one side of the tow line.
Ed, on the first breath. Good work. Pitching. Telling their blue steel's not strong enough for us. Wait, Peter, let me get
The other part was still stuck, so I had to go down to cut the other part. That moment, something that haunts me to this day, happened. The whale very slowly turned in the water, and I could see it looking at me. Perhaps the whale knew we were trying to help it. Maybe it didn't, I don't know. It headed off out to sea and hasn't been heard of since.
It has been a year and a half since the whale was rescued.
We don't know what happened to the whale. We haven't had any kind of report. We do know it hasn't ended up back on the beach, and to us that's a success.
Humpback whales still remain fairly critically endangered. I think every humpback whale counts, emotionally and as a signpost of our own environment's health.
Today we're going to have to work with industry, we're going to have to work with environmentalists, we're going to have to think of what we have in common rather than think of our differences, and try to work together to make this world a better place.